The fluorescent lights of that conference room didn't just flicker, they buzzed with a sound like a death knell for my entire life. My name is Elsa Catherine Hayes, and for 12 years I believed that loyalty and competence would earn me the seat at the table. Instead, my father gave the CEO title to my spoiled 23-year-old brother, then demoted me to his trainer. It was a calculated humiliation, an insult that shattered my devotion and cost him his entire company. They thought I was trapped because I was family. They forgot I was the architect of their operation. What happens when the person who built the fortress walks away with all the blueprints and sells the demolition codes to their biggest rival? Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The fluorescent lights in the HTM conference room weren't just flickering. They were waging a high-pitched sonic war against the inside of my skull. It was a buzzing, insistent whine that echoed the nausea rolling in my stomach. I was running on 3 hours of fitful sleep, half a protein bar I'd choked down 2 hours ago, and a cocktail of over-the-counter flu meds that made the world feel like it was padded in cotton. My temperature was hovering around 101 degrees, but the third quarter logistics reports were due, and I was the only person who had ever known how to run the projections. I was the architect of our systems. The house only stood because I held the blueprints in my head. For the last 12 years since I was 17, and the business almost capsized after a major rail strike, Hayes Transport and Manufacturing HTM had been my entire life. Now, at 29, I was the acting director of operations. Acting was the key word. In reality, I was the COO, the CFO, and the head of HR all rolled into one efficient, underpaid, and utterly exhausted package. My father, Robert Bob Hayes, the founder, hadn't glanced at a supply chain manifest or negotiated a serious client contract in at least 5 years. He just came in every week to sign the checks I prepared. I started hacking out a cough, my throat raw and burning just as the door swung open. Dad walked in. He was 60, silver-haired, impeccably tailored, and flashing the practiced paternal smile he used whenever he was about to sell something, or apparently when he was about to disappoint me. "Elsa. Catherine perfect," he said, clapping his hands together. He didn't look at my bloodshot eyes or the pallor of my skin. "The reports are almost done," I rasped, wincing as I swallowed. "I just need to finalize the cost per unit analysis for the new quarter." "Wonderful, wonderful," he said, waving a hand dismissively. He wasn't looking at me, but past me toward the door. That door opened again to admit my brother Dean Hayes. Dean 23 was a permanent advertisement for himself, all polish and no substance. He carried his father's smile, but on him it looked brittle. He'd just graduated with a business degree from a decent university, a degree I had helped pay for by deferring my bonus again. He'd been shadowing me for exactly 2 weeks. In that time, he'd been late 7 times, taken an average 2-hour lunch break, and once asked if our main steel supplier, a partner we'd relied on for 3 decades, was like a big deal or something. Dad, Elsa, Dean said, nodding curtly without taking his eyes off his phone. He walked straight to the table, taking the seat at the head, my seat, the one I always took when running meetings. "Thank you both for coming," Robert said, beaming at his son. "HTM has been my life's work, but I'm not getting any younger. It's time to think about the future. It's time for new blood, a new vision." My heart hammered against my ribs, momentarily overriding the flu symptoms. This was it. It had to be it. For 3 solid years, I had formally requested a title and salary review. I knew I was being paid less than an entry-level logistics manager at Sterling, our competitor, while I had personally grown our active client base by 40%. Each time, Dad had given the same patronizing line, "Be patient, Isabella. It's all in the family anyway. It's not about titles." I straightened my back, trying to look healthy, professional, capable. This was the moment he would finally make me president or COO. "Dean, my boy," Robert said, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "He's a natural, a real leader. He sees the future of this industry." The cotton dissolved from my head, replaced by a sudden icy silence. I watched as if from a vast distance as my father continued. So it is with immense pride that I announce Dean Hayes as the new Chief Executive Officer of Hayes Transport and Manufacturing, effective immediately. The room was silent. Our two senior-most employees whom I had hired and trained stared fixedly at their notepads. Dean just grinned, puffing out the chest of his absurdly expensive new suit. But, what? The word was small, pathetic, caught in my raw throat. My father finally looked at me, his smile tightening. Oh, and of course, Elsa Catherine will be continuing in her vital role. He checked a note card, as if he couldn't remember my job description. She'll be our new Executive Transition Support Specialist to help Dean transition into his leadership position. A perfect fit. Executive Transition Support Specialist. I hadn't just been demoted, I had been erased. I was now an assistant tasked with training the boy who played mobile games during budget reviews. My fever, the grinding and exhaustion, the years of 70-hour weeks. It all coalesced into a single terrifyingly sharp point of clarity. I had given them my youth, my health, and my talent. In return, they hadn't just passed me over, they had humiliated me. Dean, sensing the meeting was over, gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder. Don't worry, Izzy. I'll still let you handle the nerd stuff. You're great at it. I walked back to my office, the large one with the whiteboard wall covered in my equations, the one I'd earned, and locked the door. I didn't feel anger or even sorrow. I just felt a cold, hard resolve. I had been deemed an essential, reliable, unpaid furnace. You don't praise a furnace, you just expect it to work. They had made a fatal error, they thought I was trapped. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Victor Sterling, the CEO of Apex's rival Sterling Logistics Solutions SLS. He must have seen the internal announcement that had just been circulated. CEO, huh? Bet you're thrilled. I stared at the screen. The old Elsa, the loyal, beaten-down daughter, would have deleted it. The new Elsa, the one born 10 minutes ago in that conference room, picked up the phone. The feverish tremble was gone, replaced by something razor-sharp. Victor, Elsa Catherine Hayes, you free for a call? I knew this day would come. Elsa. Victor Sterling said, his voice void of surprise and faintly amused. I just didn't think Robert would be this stupid. A 23-year-old CEO. Is he insane? He's confident in his choice, I replied. My voice still a little rough from the flu, but each word precise. He's an idiot, Victor stated flatly. And he's about to lose the only thing keeping that relic of a company afloat. He knows you pulled a miracle out of the Q2 supply chain, right? He knows that I'm a very good executive transition support specialist, I countered. Victor laughed, a short, dry, humorless sound. He didn't. Oh my. I'm going to send you an offer letter right now. I'm not even going to lowball you. It's 5 times your current salary, plus a signing bonus, that will cover whatever penalty you have for breaking your contract. Which, by the way, I'd bet my left arm you don't even have. He was right. I never signed a formal contract. I was just family. A fact Robert used to deny me every protection afforded to a true employee, the non-compete loophole. What's the job? I asked, sinking into the chair I had earned but never truly owned. Senior strategic consultant, reporting directly to me. Your job is to make Sterling Logistics Solutions smarter. You bring me your brain, your processes, and any attachments you might have that are no longer happy at HTM. You set your own hours. You start whenever you want. I looked at the complex logistics matrix I'd engineered on the whiteboard. It was intricate, beautiful, and utterly incomprehensible to anyone but me. I had built a fortress, and I was the only one with the key. I'll need 2 weeks, I said. To give notice, Victor sounded surprised. No, I replied, a cold, slow smile spreading across my face. To prepare my exit, I'll be in touch. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in quiet, meticulous demolition. On the surface, I was the image of the dutiful, supportive daughter. My fever broke, but the glacial ice in my veins remained. I showed up, I nodded in meetings, and I began the transition. Robert was in a state of paternal bliss. convinced he was a wise king securing his legacy. He saw himself as a brilliant salesman, a myth he clung to, failing to grasp that the industry had changed. It wasn't about handshakes anymore. It was about data optimization and relentless efficiency, the complex machine I had built. I was the reliable, unpaid utility, and you don't praise a furnace for running, you just expect it to work. Dean was worse than I expected. His entire operational strategy, proudly presented in his first meeting, consisted of two things: getting a new espresso machine for the break room and redesigning the company logo. "It just doesn't pop, Izzy," he'd said, holding up the classic strong logo our clients had trusted for 30 years. "It needs to be more Web3. We manufacture custom steel gaskets for the aerospace industry, Dean," I replied, my voice dead flat. "Our clients care about our parts not failing at 30,000 feet, not Web3. He just waved me off. "You're thinking small. You've got to think about the brand." This was the man Robert had chosen, a man whose primary skill was spending money we didn't have. While Dean was busy getting quotes for leather beanbag chairs, I was working, but not for him. I didn't steal. I didn't break a single law. I just organized my departure to ensure maximum operational friction. First, I documented my systems by writing a transition manual for Dean. It was 50 pages long, impeccably formatted, and completely useless. It listed what needed to be done, e.g., adjust freight forwarder contracts for Q4 variants, run monthly P&L against revised inventory forecasts, but never how or why. It listed the software platforms, but not the master admin passwords, which of course were only ever registered to my personal email address. It described the client reporting system, but omitted the custom-built macros and scripts I had written over the years to make it function. To Dean, it would look like a comprehensive guide. To the company, it was a map with no roads. Second, I secured the choke points. I checked every critical function: payroll disbursement, the supplier ordering portals, the shipping manifests, and the client database access. All of it was locked behind a two-factor authentication system I had set up years ago for security, a system that routed through my personal cell phone. I was the single sole admin. Without me, they couldn't pay their people, order new materials, or ship their existing stock. Robert and Dean, in their blinding arrogance, had never thought to check. I had built the entire apparatus of the company and secured it with a simple digital deadbolt only I controlled. Third, I performed my legal data grab. I downloaded all of my personal contacts, the personal cell numbers of every supplier, freight forwarder, and client lead. These were not company property. They were relationships I had built, one 3 a.m. phone call at a time. Finally, I executed my loyalty audit. I called our top 3 clients, including our largest account. "Just letting you know I'm moving on from HTM. My last day is this Friday. I'll be taking a senior consulting role at Sterling Logistics Solutions. I just wanted to personally thank you for your partnership over the years. I didn't ask them to follow me. I didn't need to. I had just painted 2 very clear futures for them, one managed by me at a professional competitor, the other managed by a child CEO who cared more about Web3. The panic I heard on the other end of the line was the sound of my vindication beginning. On my last day of Friday, I placed the transition manual on Dean's desk along with my company laptop and keys. He was on the phone arguing with a vendor about the shade of gray for his new office chair. I walked over to Robert's office. He was on a call, laughing, no doubt booking another golf trip. He waved me in and finished his call. "So all settled in with the new role?" he asked, not looking up from his computer. "Actually, Dad, today is my last day," I said. The silence that followed was heavy. He slowly swiveled in his chair. "What? What did you say?" "You're taking a vacation after only 2 weeks with Dean?" "No. I'm resigning. I've accepted a position with another company." The color drained from his face. The jovial patriarch was gone, replaced by the cold, hard man I knew was underneath. "You're what? Who?" "Sterling Logistics Solutions." His face turned a deep, blotchy red. "You're going to them. After everything I've given you. This is betrayal, Elsa. This is what Dad—" I interrupted, my voice as cold as his. "A business decision. You of all people should understand that. You made yours, I'm making mine. I am your father, he roared. And I was your most valuable employee, I shot back. An employee you underpaid, undervalued, and publicly humiliated. You made a 23-year-old kid the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company 2 weeks after his graduation. You demoted the one person who kept this place running to support specialist. This wasn't a family decision, Dad. It was a stupid one. He was speechless, staring at me. My resignation letter is on your desk, I said, turning to leave. Good luck, Dad. You're going to need it. I walked out of that office, out of that building, and I didn't look back. I got in my car, and for the first time in 12 years, I didn't feel sick or tired or angry. I felt the profound, overwhelming sense of agency, the ultimate American freedom. The one they couldn't take away. My new office at Sterling Logistics Solutions SLS was on the 20th floor, a glass-walled perch that overlooked the entire city. It was smaller than my old one, but it was mine, and the first prorated salary deposit that hit my bank account at the end of the week, still more than my old monthly pay, was definitely, unequivocally mine. This was the fulfillment of the American dream's success, not inherited, but earned through competence. I felt a surge of professional confidence that had been suffocated for years under Robert's patriarchal thumb. Victor Sterling was a man of his word. He didn't micromanage. He didn't ask me to train his underqualified relatives. He gave me one clear, succinct directive: find our weaknesses and fix them. Find HTM's weaknesses and exploit them. For the first week, I was a force multiplier. I dove into SLS's operations. They were a good company, but sloppy. Their logistics were inefficient, relying on too expensive third-party carriers, and their inventory system was functional, but outdated. I spent 72 hours mapping their entire supply chain, and by Thursday, I presented Victor with a 15-page plan that would cut overhead by 20% in 6 months. I knew you were good, Elsa, he said, looking over my projections. I didn't know you were a magician. It's not magic, I said. It's just math and relationships. I was going to call our old freight partners at HTM. I knew they would give us a better rate just to get away from the new erratic management I had just escaped. This was the strength of community. My former professional allies valued my competence, not my last name. While I was building SLS up, the chaos I had meticulously planned back at HTM began its inevitable rollout. My personal phone, which I had expected to go silent, began to buzz repeatedly. The first calls came from my old team, the ones I respected. "Elsa, you have to help me," whispered Sarah, our dependable head of accounting. Her voice was thin with frantic terror. "Dean just approved a $500,000 purchase order for premium Italian office furniture. He said it's a capital investment in brand prestige. Our payroll account is going to be overdrawn by Monday." "Sarah, I don't work there anymore," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You need to talk to Thomas. Thomas is in Florida. He's not answering his phone. And Dean, he doesn't know the admin password for the payroll system. He tried to guess it and now it's locked." The trap had sprung. The company wasn't just run by my knowledge, it was secured by it. The payroll, the supplier portals, the shipping manifests, all of it was locked behind that two-factor authentication system routed through my personal cell phone. I was the only admin. Without me, they couldn't pay their people, order new materials, or ship existing orders. I told Sarah calmly how to contact the software provider and begin the arduous 72-hour identity verification process required to add a new admin. I wasn't a monster, but I wasn't a fool either. I offered her the professional route out of the mess Dean had created, but no shortcut to Dean himself. Then the client calls started. David, the procurement head of our largest $10 million account, called me on my new work line. He hung up on me. David said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Who did?" I asked. "Jason. I mean Dean, the new CEO. I called to ask about our critical Q4 shipment. He told me he was in a creative meeting and that I should email the support desk, so I'm calling you." As of this moment, Sterling Logistics Solutions is our new primary supplier. I looked at the operational plan on my desk, already anticipating the new volume. Yes, David, I can handle the volume. I'll have a contract over to you by noon. This wasn't espionage, it was simply a market opportunity. I identified a massive high-value client who had been abruptly abandoned by their previous supplier, and I seized it, fulfilling my professional duty to Victor Sterling. Robert and Dean weren't just incompetent, they were actively arrogant, dismantling the company with their pride and sending the damaging information directly to me. By the end of my second week at SLS, I had streamlined their logistics, started poaching their top-tier talent who were messaging me on LinkedIn, begging for an escape, and personally transferred HTM's single largest account to our books. The first direct call from my father came on a Friday evening, exactly 14 days after I had walked out. "Elsa Catherine," he barked. "No, hello? What did you do?" "I'm not sure what you mean, Dad," I said, sipping a glass of wine and looking out at the city lights. The payroll system. The client list. David, he's leaving us. He said he's going to Apex. I mean, SLS. You did this. This is illegal. Is it? I asked, keeping my voice level. Is it illegal to answer my phone when a client calls me? Is it illegal to give my new employer my best work? You're the one who signed his last contract, Dad. Go read the non-compete clause. Oh wait, you never included one. You thought a handshake was good enough. You ungrateful. I have to go, Dad, I said, cutting him off, not allowing him to launch into his manipulative narrative. I have a real job now, and unlike you, I'm not done working for the day. I hung up. The silence in my apartment felt richer and more peaceful than it had in years. The house of cards I had built was beginning to teeter, and I, for one, couldn't wait to watch it fall under the weight of his own decisions. Dean's calls were a bizarre mix of bluster and panic. "Izzy, this is ridiculous. The suppliers are asking for some kind of verification code I've never heard of. Just tell me what it is. I'm the CEO. Dean, I don't work for you. I am not your support specialist. I'm your competition." I'd reply calmly, reviewing my notes for my next meeting with Victor. You're just jealous. Dad was right. You're bitter because he chose me. He did choose you, Dean, I said. Now you get to do the job. All of it. Goodbye. Robert's calls grew more desperate. The anger was replaced by a wheedling, manipulative tone. Elsa, your brother is struggling. He's young. He just needs your guidance. You can't just abandon your family like this. I didn't abandon my family. I said, my patience wearing thin. I left a job that was actively harming me. For 3 years I asked you for a raise. I was running the entire company, and you paid me less than my own warehouse manager. But Dean, who has never worked a day in his life, you hand him a CEO title and a matching salary. Does that sound like family to you? It's not about the money, Elsa. It's about loyalty, he sputtered. You're right. It's not about the money, I finished. It's about the fact that you thought I was so stupid, so beaten down, that I would just accept it. You thought I had nowhere else to go. You were wrong. The escalating desperation of my father and brother climaxed with their final futile maneuver, a lawsuit. Robert, operating purely on ingrained pride and a rapidly depleting bank account, hired a lawyer and slapped me with a claim for breach of fiduciary duty and tortious interference. It was nonsense, and we both knew it. I had never been an officer of the company. Robert had personally ensured that loophole was wide open, and I hadn't interfered. His clients had fled due to incompetence. But the lawsuit was the final line in the sand. Victor Sterling retained Apex's top corporate litigation shark, a woman named Ms. Graves. She was all steel, sharp edges, and zero tolerance for inefficiency. We met with my father and his small-town lawyer in a sterile, windowless conference room downtown. Robert looked 10 years older. His tailor-made suit now looked threadbare on his gaunt frame. The jovial patriarch was completely gone. Dean, who sat beside him, looked utterly terrified, staring fixedly at his hands, as if trying to memorize the grain of the wood. The 2 weeks of chaos had aged them both into shadows of their former arrogant selves. My client, Mr. Hayes, their lawyer, began weakly clearing his throat, alleges that Miss Hayes used her inside knowledge to steal clients and proprietary information. Ms. Graves held up one hand, a small decisive gesture that stopped the man mid-sentence. The room fell silent. "Let's be perfectly clear," she said, her voice like honed steel cutting through the thin air. "Your client, Mr. Robert Hayes, is guilty of at best catastrophic mismanagement and at worst constructive fraud by misrepresenting the viability of his company to his lenders." Robert's lawyer blanched. "Now see here." "No, you see here," Ms. Graves said, leaning forward. "We have sworn statements from 3 of your former top clients, all attesting that they left Hayes Transport and Manufacturing due to the unprofessionalism and blatant incompetence of the new CEO, Mr. Dean Hayes." She slid a file across the table. "We also have a sworn affidavit from your former head of accounting, Sarah, attesting that Mr. Dean Hayes attempted to make a non-essential $500,000 purchase that would have demonstrably bankrupted your payroll account, a move that can only be described as reckless." Dean sank so low in his chair he almost disappeared behind the table edge. He was sweating profusely. And finally, Ms. Graves continued, her voice gaining the chilling finality of an executioner's pronouncement. "We have this." She slid over an industry-wide credit report. "Your company is insolvent. You defaulted on your loan with First National on Tuesday. Your credit rating has been downgraded to junk. You have no major clients, no credit line, and no case. You are not in a position to sue anyone. You are, however, in a position to be sued by your creditors, your former clients, and frankly, by Sterling Logistics Solutions for wasting our time." Robert stared at the papers, his hands trembling slightly on the table. The fight was gone. He was no longer the roaring tyrant. He was just a broken man who had finally met the reality his pride had created. What do you want?" he whispered, his eyes finally lifting to meet mine. This was the moment of strategic arrival. The emotional spell was broken. Dean was now crying silently, his shoulders shaking. Robert was utterly defeated. "I want you to stop," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying across the sterile room. "I want you to stop blaming me for your own mistake. You did this. You chose him. You destroyed your own company because your pride was more important than your sense of decency." I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. The lawsuit was dropped effective immediately. I had achieved agency. The title felt hollow. "I'll pay you," Robert shouted, all pretense gone, the word bubbling up from a place of pure, desperate fear. "I'll match him. I'll match whatever Sterling is paying you. Just come back and fix it." This was the moment of the ultimate rejection, the strategic reveal I had been holding in reserve. "You'll match him," I let a small, sad laugh escape. "Dad, my signing bonus at SLS was more than your entire annual salary for the last 5 years combined, and my new salary is 5 times what you paid me. Can you match that?" "Dad, can HTM, which apparently can't even pay its steel supplier, afford to pay me what I'm actually worth? Or were you just hoping I'd come back for the same insulting paycheck you gave me for a decade?" Robert froze. The number was so incomprehensible to him, so far beyond what he had ever considered paying me, that he couldn't process it. The man who valued everything in dollars and cents finally understood he had been so busy saving a few thousand on my salary that he had lost the millions I generated. Dean looked horrified, finally grasping the true cost of his CEO title. He paid you a bonus?" "They pay for talent, Dean," I said. "It's another one of those business school concepts. You should look it up." I turned to leave, but stopped one last time at the door. I pulled a business card from my purse. It wasn't mine. It was Victor Sterling's. "I'm not here to save you," I stated, my voice losing all trace of emotion. "I'm here to tell you one last thing." I leaned in. "Sterling Logistics Solutions is aware that your assets are being liquidated by the bank on Monday. Marcus has authorized me to make a bid on the physical machinery. We're prepared to offer 10 cents on the dollar for the contents of the warehouse." The realization dawned on my father's face, a slow-motion wave of horror. I wasn't there to save his company. I was there to buy its bones. You're a vulture, he whispered, his face ashen. No, Dad, I said, pressing the card into his limp hand. I'm a businesswoman. You of all people should understand that. Dean finally looked at me, and in his eyes I saw not resentment, but a dawning, terrible respect. He reached out and took the card from his father's hand. I'll call Mr. Sterling's office on Monday, he mumbled. I'll coordinate the sale. It was the full, decisive surrender. He had at last broken free. I nodded once, turned my back on them both, and walked away from the ruined empire. The liquidation of Hayes Transport and Manufacturing was swift and brutal. As Dean had promised, he coordinated the sale of the physical assets to Sterling Logistics Solutions. I didn't attend. I was too busy running my new life. Victor sent a team, and by the end of the month, the machinery I had worked on for 12 years, the expensive lathes, the precision tools, the complex inventory racks, was being installed in a new SLS warehouse, a modern, efficient space I was now in charge of setting up. The company that had once consumed my identity was reduced to salvage. Within the year, Victor promoted me to Chief Operating Officer (COO) of Sterling Logistics Solutions. The promotion wasn't charity, it was earned. My salary was truly life-changing, and the respect I commanded from my peers and the entire industry was total. I had a team I had built from the ground up, all selected for their competence, not their last name. I finally understood the American ideal. The ultimate freedom lies not in the inheritance of power, but in the agency to seize it. I was the master of my own success. I used my new resources and my newfound influence to do something proactive, something that honored the person who taught me the value of quiet, hard work. I started a scholarship fund in my late mother's name for women in engineering and logistics. It was a tangible legacy of resilience, ensuring other brilliant, quiet women wouldn't have to fight as hard as I did just to be seen. About a month after the last of HTM's debt was settled, I received a letter. It was from Dean, handwritten on simple notebook paper, not corporate letterhead. It was the first honest thing he had ever produced. He didn't make excuses or bluster, he simply owned his actions. Elsa Catherine, it read. I know sorry doesn't mean anything. I was arrogant and I was stupid. I believed what Dad told me, that I was a natural, and I never stopped to see that you were the one doing all the work. I never respected you, and I am ashamed of that. I am working now at a logistics warehouse on the loading dock. It's hard work. I wish I had appreciated what you did for us and for me. I hope one day you can forgive me. I read the letter twice. He had chosen the hard road, the road of earned labor, finally separating his fate from his father's toxic myth. He had finally made a decisive choice of his own, based on reality, not entitlement. I didn't write back. The necessity for reply had passed, but I kept the letter. It was a marker of his genuine beginning, and it gave me a quiet internal peace regarding his fate. Robert, however, never reached out formally. The social exile was total. The story of his arrogance had become a cautionary tale in every boardroom. I heard through old contacts that he had tried to get a job as a logistics consultant, but his toxic reputation was so widespread no one would hire him. He was a ghost in the industry he had once helped build. A year after the awards dinner, the night I had bought the bones of his company, I was leaving my office late, crossing the quiet concrete parking garage. The fluorescent lights hummed above, and the silence amplified the click of my heels. I saw a figure standing by my car. It was a familiar, stooped silhouette. Robert Hayes. He looked terrible. Thin, his silver hair unkempt, his old suit baggy on his frame. The social exile and the financial ruin had reduced him to a shadow of the patriarch. Elsa Catherine, he rasped. I stopped, my keys still clutched in my hand, standing straight in my earned success. I I just wanted to see you, he said. What you've done. It's I'm proud of you, Elsa. I was a fool. I was so wrong. I I'm sorry. He was crying. The man who had only ever roared and demanded was weeping in a cold, echoing concrete garage. This was the raw, unmasked man finally defeated. I looked at him, and the last of the glacial ice in my veins finally definitively melted away. I didn't feel anger because the debt was settled. I didn't even feel pity because pity implied I still cared enough to worry about his suffering. I just felt finished. I know, Dad. That was all I could give him. It was a statement of fact, a recognition that he had finally seen the truth, not an act of forgiveness. I got in my car. He didn't move. He just stood there watching me. I drove out of the garage, and as I looked in my rearview mirror, he got smaller and smaller, a relic of a past I had fully and finally escaped. My vindication was complete, and I was at peace, free to pursue the genuine American dream, the one where you build your own house, and you alone hold the key. And as Elsa drove away, leaving the relic of her father's past behind, she found the peace that only true earned victory can bring. If this story of betrayal and ultimate triumph resonated with you, hit the subscribe button. Tell us your thoughts on the architect's vengeance below. We read every single comment of your thoughts. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.